I only have one message to give you. I don't care what you think of me. I don't care what you call me. I do care what you do with this information because it is important to our survival as a species.
Hey guys, wanted to make this video today. I'm going to cover a few topics, going to cover vaccinations, going to cover FEMA camps again and all that jazz. But I am going to lead with this because I've noticed there's a bunch of trolls that always come after me, especially on like Reddit. Not a lot of them, but the few that do always tend to spout off these mainstream type of things, or they don't even actually present any evidence. They just call you a name and then disappear, you know what I mean? But anyway, this is factcheck.org, right? Sounds real authoritative, sounds real official. Put a stamp on that. That is just the deliverers of truth, right? And I'm leading with this because I want you to think differently and just show you how easy it is to deceive people, all right? So check this out. Conspiracy theory misinterprets goals of Gates Foundation, right? Factcheck.org. A conspiracy theory falsely claims Bill Gates is plotting to use COVID-19 testing and a future vaccine to track people with microchips. The Gates Foundation has advocated for expanded testing and has funded vaccine research, but neither of those involves implanted microchips, okay? So they're trying to debunk it, right? And then it says, full story, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has committed millions of dollars to research treatments for COVID, blah, blah, blah. Following day, a website called biohackinfo.com posted a story with the headline, Bill Gates will use microchip implants to fight coronavirus. It has been shared more than 13,000 times on Facebook. The story cited Gates' answer to the forum and then declared that digital certificates Gates was referring to are human implantable quantum dot tattoos. It says that's not true. It's a mashup of two unrelated things. First, digital certificates are used to send encrypted information over the internet, as in the common case of electronic signatures, which are used to verify identity. They were officially defined by what is now called the Telecommunications Standardization Sector in 1988 and have always been virtual, not physical. When Gates mentioned their use in the forum, he was referring to digital certificates as part of an effort to create a digital platform that would expand home-based, self-administered testing for COVID-19. He referred to the same effort to ramp up home testing at another point in the forum, saying the testing in the U.S. is not organized yet. In the next few weeks, he hopes the government fixes it by having a website you can go to, The second part of the claim, and the one that likely led to the microchip assertion, is a reference to unrelated research that was funded by the Gates Foundation. I mean, of course, they're going to say unrelated, and published in December, right when it broke out, right? In an effort to address the problem of poor record keeping in quote-unquote low-resource settings, such as developing countries that research proposed keeping a record of vaccination on a patient's skin. It tested an invisible dye that could last up to 5 years and be read with a specifically adapted smartphone. So basically they wanted to give you a bio tattoo using a bioluminescent chemical, I believe called luciferase, which, I mean, just that name alone, I mean, that's pretty funny that they call it Lucifer race. But they wanted to do that, and then that way anywhere you go you can have your skin scanned to make sure you got the vaccine. So there are things that tie into this, guys, that you can actually look up that they admit that they do, and then they go around and tell you that you're crazy for believing it. But here's the point of all this, right? Factcheck.org, a project of the Annenberg Public Policy Center, right? Trying to debunk theories about Bill Gates. So you go to Wikipedia, right? And you go to factcheck.org. It already mentioned that it's, a project of the Annenberg Public Policy Center, right? But here's just how easy it is to check the information or check the people supposedly giving you correct information. So when you click on Annenberg Foundation, right? What's the second thing it says? The Annenberg Foundation receives grants from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Go fucking figure, right? So the same people who are supposedly debunking theories about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as false, the people who created that site receive funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Yeah, they're totally non-biased and have absolutely no incentive to write positive things about them, right? Do you see how easy that is, guys? Just call something factcheck.org, say something, and then call anyone who disagrees with what you're saying crazy and a conspiracy theorist. And then all you have to do is just go to who created it, and it literally is funded by the very same people it's telling you aren't doing these things. So, I mean, that's a fact. You can look that up yourself. Not factcheck.org. Don't get your information from there, but I mean, I just showed you how easy it is to debunk their quote-unquote official narrative, right? So if you disagree with what I just said, and you disagree with this actual evidence in front of your face, close the video, because you're not going to like the rest of it, because there's no reaching you. You cannot be reached. Just, I don't know what you should do, honestly. I really don't. But yeah, turn this video off, because you're not going to like me or my channel. But anyway, you see how easy that was, guys? Now check this out. This is a patent, I believe held by Microsoft, patent W02020060606A1. And people around the internet were like, oh my god, the 666. That's a little bit of a stretch in my opinion, but I mean, you never know with these things. But anyway, this is what it claims. This is basically a way to to create Bitcoin and mine it using your body's activity, essentially. So if you don't know what that means, you're going to have to look more into Bitcoin and what coin farming, harvesting, all that stuff. I don't know the right terms. Honestly, I haven't got into Bitcoin. I made a wallet once and then bought some, but then got out of it because I'm like, I don't know how to mine Bitcoin or anything like that. I understand the general concept, sort of, but it is kind of confusing. But anyway, I don't claim to be an expert on that at all. If you have information in the comments and you can clarify it better for someone watching this, by all means. I am no expert. A cryptocurrency system comprising, this is the claim of it, comprising one or more processors and memory storing executable instructions that, if executed by the one or more processors, configure the cryptocurrency system to communicate with a device of the user, receive body activity data, which is generated based on body activity of the user, wherein the body activity is sensed by a sensor communicatively coupled to or comprised in the device of the user. Verify if the body activity data of the user satisfies one or more conditions set by the cryptocurrency system, and award cryptocurrency to the user whose body activity data is verified. So essentially what they just said with all that jargon is it could be a device that you wear, a device that you're holding, a device that is meant to verify that you are who you are and award cryptocurrency based off of that. It doesn't say that something could be inside of you. It doesn't say that a chip or an implant will go inside of you and it will verify you are who you are. It doesn't say that, but this is a precursor to that. Because if you think about it, guys, we went from just cash, or from precious metals really, to cash, and then we went from cash to, credit cards, and then we used, or checks, I guess you could say, and then credit cards, and then credit cards with chips, and then smartphones, and then the next logical step, because they conditioned you over such a long period of time to just accept it as normal, will eventually just be a chip inside of you. And then the whole argument is going to be, well, it's not hackable, well, you are who you are, and it removes identity theft from being a possibility, and they're going to sell it with everything they got. They're going to basically make it seem like the best thing in the world, and you would have to be mentally retarded to not get it. That's the same thing they're doing with masks right now. Oh, if you don't wear a mask, you're a murderer, you don't understand science, you hate people, whatever. Just guilt into making you acquiesce. And that will be used for the vaccine as well. They're already trialing ways to make people feel guilty and to shame and chastise others for not receiving it, even though they are bioweapons, and anyone who has done a modicum of research knows that, and knows not to trust people who try to push vaccines. it's so in your face to me that at this point, people who don't see it, I don't know what to tell them. I really don't. You either are never going to wake up or you're not a person. Like, you can't be a person if you're that dumb, in my opinion. So, yeah, they want to eventually put a chip inside of you that is going to control all your money, have all your health records, vaccination records, everything that constitutes you as an individual on paper will then be in that chip. And if they don't like what you have to say, they can just turn that chip off, guys. I posted that video footage of Aaron Russo talking about the Rockefellers wanting to chip people. I might put it in towards the end of this video, who knows. But the point is, the very same people telling you, oh, this isn't going on, are being paid by the very same people who were developing it. All right, now let's get away from that. This is an article I read today which inspired me to make this video. If you recall my video yesterday about the quarantine camps in New Zealand, this is another article which I guess came out yesterday, but I didn't read until this morning. It's entitled, Forced Isolation May Be the Only Way to Stop Resurgence of Virus, and this is from Bloomberg, another one of those faggy, mainstream, bullshit sources, so you can trust it, right? Flare-ups from Australia to Japan show the world hasn't learned an early lesson from the coronavirus crisis to stop the spread. Those with mild or symptom-free coronavirus infections must be forced to isolate, both from their communities and family. Do you see how on the nose this is when you have context and understanding, and you realize that this isn't about a virus and that it's about the control of people? Then all of this kind of makes sense. Flare-ups from Australia to Japan show the world hasn't learned an early lesson. You haven't learned your lesson, guys. So you need to be separated and isolated from your communities and family until you learn that lesson. Men with guns are going to take you and bring you to an isolation center until you learn your lesson. Until you learn to stop spreading the virus even if you have no symptoms. Do you understand what they're saying? Listen to their words, guys. They couldn't be more in your face with it. Like, in Australia, where Victoria states have been reporting record deaths, some 3,000 checks last month on people who should have been isolating at home found 800 were out and about. Oh no, guys. 3,000 people were told, you must do this, and 800 people disobeyed. Oh no. In Japan, where the virus has roared back, people are staying home but aren't in isolation. 40% of elderly patients are getting sick from family members in the same apartments. The failure to effectively manage contagious people with mild or no symptoms is a driving factor behind some of the world's worst resurgences. But lessons from Italy, South Korea, and others that have successfully contained large-scale outbreaks show that there's a tried and tested approach to cutting off transmission. Move them out of their homes into centralized facilities while they get over their infections. Move them out of their homes into centralized facilities while they get over their infections. Which usually doesn't require longer than a few weeks. Yeah, like when they started this whole thing almost 7 months later. It's only going to be 2 weeks. It's just 2 weeks. It's just the tip. It's just the tip. It's just my entire cock in your mouth. It's just my entire cock in your ass. I'm telling you, people, wake up. A laissez-faire approach, naively trusting everyone to be responsible, has been shown to be ineffective, as there will always be a proportion who will breach the terms of the isolation, said Jeremy Lin, adjunct professor at the National University of Singapore's Sa Sui Hawk School of Public Health. Rolls right off the tongue. Faced with a new cluster this week after 102 days without a locally transmitted case, New Zealand, who was I just talking about, right, has quickly enacted this strategy, placing 17 people, including 2 children below the age of 10, into centralized quarantine. I mean, they want to take control of your kids. What better way than to just take them from you and force them into isolation with people you've never met? And how are you going to know what's going on, right? But other countries face sustained spread like Australia and the US are not broadly enacting the policy despite its proven track record. Their unwillingness or inability to do so underscores the challenges faced by liberal democracies whose populations are less likely to tolerate measures that require individual sacrifice for the greater good. Okay, guys, they constantly tout this idea that we have a democracy. We do not have a democracy. A democracy literally means mob rule. We do not have a democracy. We have a democratic republic. We do not have a democracy. And it's definitely not a liberal democracy. And the word liberal used to be a good thing. What it means now is like totally opposite of what it actually was. Liberal used to be pretty much libertarian. Now it's basically Marxism. But hey, I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, right? But they always reinforce this narrative that we have a democracy. We don't have a democracy, and stop repeating it because you sound stupid. The existence of a large group of carriers who hardly feel sick is a unique feature of the coronavirus crisis, and a major factor that has driven its rapid spread across the globe. Unlike in previous outbreaks, like the 2003 SARS epidemic, many infected people don't feel ill enough to stay home, and so spread the pathogen widely as they go about their daily lives. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has estimated that 40% of COVID-19 infections are asymptomatic, guys. So the Center for Disease Control admits that testing for the virus up to half the time is inaccurate. Flip a coin, you got it. Flip a coin, you don't. Flip a coin until you do. And now they're saying 40% of the infections don't even have symptoms. So we're closing down the entire world. We're forcing people into lockdowns. We're separating families. We're keeping children 6 feet apart, can't play with each other, having people wear masks who aren't sick, breathing in the same filth that they've been breathing all day, lowering their, blood oxygen saturation levels, risking hypoxia, people losing their jobs, businesses going down forever, all this stuff for something where half the people don't even have symptoms. If half the people don't have symptoms, then it's, what the fuck? Who cares? Why are you even making it an issue? That's my point. This whole thing is stupid. The whole narrative is stupid. I bet they probably are sitting back right now going, holy shit, dude. I never thought we'd get this far. How are people this dumb? We literally told them it was fake. We simulated it happening right before it happened. And then the same people who simulated it are also funding the supposed cure for it. And we can't even prove it exists. And the tests we admit aren't even right half the time. And people who carry it half the time don't even spread it. Or can't. Or don't have symptoms. These people are stupid. Holy fuck. I can't believe they're buying it. Let's kill them. That's what they think. But anyway, 40% of people are asymptomatic, right? And this is the Washington Examiner, another mainstream garbage source. Look at this douchebag. Look at this bigger douchebag. Actually, I don't know, he might be a bigger douchebag, but they're both equally douchebags. In a new report, the World Health Organization announced that asymptomatic carriers of the coronavirus rarely spread the virus to others. If this is true, we just shut down the nation and drove our economy into a recession for nothing. What did I just say? Like many others, I supported the initial shutdowns because I was worried that we knew too little about the coronavirus and who was spreading it. Let me get some coffee, actually. Excuse me. And we needed to prevent our healthcare system from being overrun. Our health experts warned us that COVID-19 spread quickly and often unnoticeably, through carriers who might not show symptoms for weeks, or perhaps never at all. Add this to a total lack of mass testing and a temporary nationwide quarantine made sense. But now the entire premise of this shutdown is being questioned. From the data we have, it still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person who actually transmits onward to a secondary individual. Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove, head of the WHO's Emerging Diseases and Zoonosis Unit, said, I already made a video about this if you want to go check it out. It's difficult to put into words how infuriating this discovery is. If asymptomatic carriers aren't the problem, we could easily have localized our response to the coronavirus by asking only those with symptoms to stay home and quarantining hotspots areas where the spread was out of control. Instead, we adopted a one-size-fits-all approach because we were acting under the presumption that any person at any time could be spreading it to just about anyone. So guys, these people admit that people who, this was June by the way, people who don't have symptoms can't spread it. But they want to put you in forced isolation anyway because you haven't learned your lesson, guys, to stop the spread, even if you have no symptoms. You have to be separated and isolated from your communities and families until you learn your lesson. You had to be put in a camp and isolated until you learn your lesson. Sounds like a re-education camp, doesn't it, right? What's this right here, right? This is an article that was published in February, guys. U.S. military approves 11 coronavirus quarantine camps next to major U.S. airports, which can treat up to 1,000 people, as the 13th American case is confirmed to California. So look how early on this was, and they were already getting quarantine camps set up. They're just now starting to bring people to them, or that we're hearing about it, especially with Arkansas and Alaska. Check out my video I made yesterday if you want to look a little more into that. But I'm telling you guys, this stuff is real. You can't even really fly right now. They set these up near the airports. I mean, who knows how many people are actually in them. But it says the Pentagon is setting up 11 quarantine camps on military bases near major airports across the U.S. in anticipation of an influx of American citizens returning from China in need of monitoring for the deadly coronavirus that is now being called COVID-19. The 13 U.S. coronavirus cases were confirmed in California on Tuesday. The deadly strain, I can't talk today, guys, which is now being called COVID-19, has killed 1,116 people and sickened more than 45,000 worldwide. The Department of Defense approved a request from the Department of Health and Human Services earlier this month for the possibility that military facilities who could accommodate 1,000 people may be set up to quarantine people who arrive from overseas. So check it out, guys. Big major cities, right? And here's one in Chicago. And we already got the Mayor Lightfoot down there, Miss New World Order. You know, all these cities tend to be part of the participating cities in like major programs of change and reform that they want to get across. It usually beta tests in places like this before it goes nationwide. Things like in Minnesota with the whole getting rid of the police department and defunding it. It all falls into the U.S. or the UN plan, Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. But a lot of places like this participate in little beta tests before they take it nationwide. So you're not going to see quarantine camps everywhere yet, but you will see them. The reason I'm making this video is because you're starting to see it pushed every day even more and more and more. Obnoxiously so. Let me close that. Now, here's an article from the New York Times, another faggy mainstream source. Go ahead and believe it. What Lockdown 2.0 looks like. Harsher rules, deeper confusion. Melbourne, Australia's second largest city, is becoming a case study in handling a second wave of infections. So like I said, just read what they just said to you. Melbourne, Australia's second largest city, is becoming a case study in handling a second wave of infections. So they're telling you there will be a second wave, and this is what's going to happen to you because this is what we're trialing out here. We're studying what's going to happen here before we do it there. That's all it is. They're telling you what they're going to do before they do it. Australia's second largest city, Melbourne, is grappling with a spiraling coronavirus outbreak that has led to a lockdown with some of the toughest restrictions in the world, offering a preview of what many urban dwellers elsewhere could confront in coming weeks and months. So they just told you expect this by basically September, October. All right? They just told you that. Remember I told you this. The new lockdown is the product of early success. The country thought it had the virus beat in June, but there was a breakdown in the quarantine program for hotels. Returning travelers passed the virus to hotel security guards in Melbourne, who carried the contagion home. Even after masks became mandatory in the city 2 weeks ago, the spread continued. Again, listen to what they're saying. Even after masks became mandatory, as in you have to do it, in the city 2 weeks ago, it continued. It still spread. So the mask did nothing, but it still spread. So now officials try to break the chain of infections. Now it's being reshaped by sweeping enforcement and fine print, a confounding matrix of heavy fines for disobedience to the lockdown and minor exceptions for everything from romantic partners to home buildings has led to silent streets and endless versions of the question, so wait, can I, fill in the blank. You should never have to ask permission to do anything from your government. Your government serves you. As far as I'm concerned, the government can eat my shit. I'm not listening to your stupid fucking advice or your arguments for why I should do something. I'm not. You're liars, and you're proven liars. Your track record, that's all it is lying. Anywhere in the world, government has killed more people than anything else. Restaurant owners are wondering about food delivery after an 8 p.m. curfew. A curfew, guys. Like I said, they're not going to call it martial law. They're going to use words like curfew, lockdown. They're not going to say FEMA camp. They're going to say quarantine camp, isolation center. Teenagers are asking if their boyfriends and girlfriends count as essential partners. That sentence is so incredibly sad, I don't even know where to start. Can animal shelter volunteers walk dogs at night? Seriously? Are house cleaners essential for those struggling with their mental health? Can people who have been tested exercise outside? Just the fact that these sentences exist now, that they have now been spoken into existence, that is the saddest thing. Because it's clearly propaganda, but if people are wondering if they can go outside and just enjoy life without asking for permission first, my head, I can't even wrap my head around just the pure, sheer stupid. The stupid hurts. It really does. This is such a weird, scary, bizarro time that we live in. Yeah, maybe if you're stupid. A student in Melbourne who admits to having hit a breaking point a few days ago when her washing machine broke. Oh my God. Our healthcare workers are hustling around the clock to keep us alive, she said. Our politicians are as scared as we are, but they have to pretend like they have a better idea than we do of what's going to happen next. Listen here to Cethia von Tessel-Roberts, if that is your real name. You are a complete moron. You are the biggest slave with Stockholm Syndrome I've probably ever heard. Your healthcare workers are doing anything but. Politicians are doing anything but. You're an idiot. Change your name to something not as weird sounding and educate yourself, because you're stupid. You are stupid if you're even a real person. You're defending your own slavery and you don't even realize it. Pandemic lockdowns, never easy, are getting ever more confusing and contentious as they evolve in the face of second and third rounds of outbreaks that have exhausted both officials and residents, with success against the virus as fleeting as the breeze. Do you hear that, guys? With success against the virus as fleeting as the breeze. The new wave of restrictions feel to many like a bombing raid that just won't end. How succinct. Think about it, guys. They tell you that what they're doing isn't achieving anything as far as stopping the spread of the virus. All it does is hamper down on your freedoms. And it literally feels like an assault, a bombing raid that won't end. Let's see. In Melbourne, a city of 5 million that is considered a capital of food and culture, the pandemic has come raging back even after a so-called Stage 3 lockdown began in early July, until recently the highest levels of restrictions. Officials have been flummoxed at every turn by the persistent complacency of just enough people to let the virus thrive and multiply. Like I said, listen to what they say. Officials have been flummoxed at every turn by the persistent complacency of just enough people to let the virus thrive and multiply. So what they're saying is, just enough people are saying, no, I'm a free person, fuck right off. And that's preventing them from enslaving them. The virus is an ideology. The virus is not physical. The ideology is freedom. The ideology is freedom of the individual, the existence of the individual, the freedom to choose what you will or will not put in your body, the freedom of autonomy, the freedom to be a sovereign person who lives and breathes this air and has just as much right on this earth as anyone else. That's the virus that they're trying to stop. They don't want you thinking like that. They want you to conform and be a slave. It's as clear as day. Here's another article, right? Scientists still can't decide if face masks actually do anything. What? Scientists can't decide how effective surgical masks and homemade alternatives are at preventing the spread of coronavirus. The CDC suggests making your own masks at home, but researchers can't say if they'll do any good. Masks are more effective when worn by sick people than healthy people, the data suggests. Which is usually what was going on for most of human history, is you put the mask on the sick person, or maybe the person directly treating the sick person. You don't put them on every healthy person who doesn't actually have it. You know what I mean? And they don't even know if it's effective to begin with. It's now been months since the coronavirus outbreak reached the point of a pandemic, which it hasn't. It has not. It's not real. And we somehow still don't have a clear answer on how effective face masks are at preventing its spread. As Live Science reports, a new batch of studies into the efficacy of various types of masks does little to settle the debate. It was just days after the novel coronavirus hit the shores of the United States that health experts were falling all over themselves to make declarations about the use of protective face masks. Initially, experts asked that everyday people avoid buying masks meant for use by doctors and healthcare professionals since they need them the most. And that made perfect sense, especially since the N95 masks that are the most useful in halting the virus were in such short supply. Health experts urged the public to avoid wearing masks entirely, as long as they were healthy, and that only people who had the virus should consider wearing one. Most of the public seemed content with that advice, at least for a while. Then the CDC updated its stance on face masks, advising the use of cloth masks similar to surgical masks, and even went as far as to produce a guide on how to make masks yourself at home. But do cloth masks, or even surgical masks, really do anything? There's a lot of confusion here, and the fact that so many purported health experts initially said to avoid wearing masks hasn't helped matters. Unfortunately, it seems even science can't make up its mind. A pair of new studies, one published in Nature Medicine and the other in Annals of Internal Medicine, attempted to tackle the question of face mask efficacy and reached widely different results. Excuse me, I'm gonna get some more coffee actually. I probably don't even need it, right? I probably sound jumpy as hell. The study published in Annals of Internal Medicine was incredibly small in scale and involved just 4 confirmed COVID-19 patients. For the study, each patient coughed into a petri dish from a distance of around 8 inches. Each participant coughed once without a mask, once with a surgical mask, and once with a cloth mask like you might make at home. The results showed that neither of the masks significantly changed the amount of virus that made it onto the petri dish. This, it would seem, suggests that the masks are pointless, right? Not so fast. The fact that the study was so limited in scale and that the researchers didn't bother to check if the results were different at greater distances meant that the data, while possibly accurate, is too meager to mean much of anything. It could be that masks don't stop droplets containing the virus from reaching a distance of 8 inches, but they still could prevent it from reaching greater distances, which would mean they're still at least somewhat useful. The second study, published in Nature Medicine, holds a bit more water. It involved 400 volunteers who were told to exhale into a filter that captures everything from a person's mouth. The scientists tallied the various viruses they found, including rhinoviruses that cause colds, influenza, and coronaviruses similar to, but not exactly the same as COVID-19. The researchers then tested surgical masks to see how well they controlled the viruses being exhaled by the participants. The results showed that surgical masks do catch at least some of it in the form of droplets coming from the person's mouth, but did not prevent the passage of aerosols of the virus. But things were different for the coronaviruses. The surgical masks seemed to mitigate the transmission of coronaviruses in both droplets and aerosols. None of the patients tested had the novel coronavirus, but the researchers believe that the similarities in the virus would cause the COVID-19 variants to produce similar results. So it says, still, this is a far-reaching endorsement from using surgical masks or cloth masks as a daily habit. There's still no clear and obvious evidence that wearing any of these masks as a healthy person prevents you from getting the virus, especially since air will tend to flow around the edges of these loose-fitting masks rather than through them. So like I said, you can take any study, and it's going to say it's not conclusive, and it hasn't proven that it does anything. So forcing healthy people who have admittedly no symptoms, and that 40% of people who don't have symptoms don't show symptoms. 40% of people don't show symptoms when they get COVID. So let's see. Here's a FEMA camp conspiracy theory. This is off Wikipedia. It says the FEMA camp's conspiracy theory holds that the United States Federal Emergency Management Agency is planning to imprison U.S. citizens in concentration camps. This is typically described as following the imposition of martial law in the United States after a major disaster or crisis. In some versions of the theory, only suspected dissidents will be imprisoned. In more extreme versions, large numbers of U.S. citizens will be imprisoned for the purposes of extermination as a New World Order is established.
With the executive branch, because otherwise it doesn't work. So you got to eliminate that compliance, and you make it a mandate, and then you do training, particularly in the city, I'll call them licensing departments, whether it's zoning, buildings, housing will be impacted by it, planning certainly, and you pick the people to run those agencies and the deputies that are pledging allegiance to the New World Order and good governance.
The current mayor of Chicago just said that in order to work for her government or be appointed by her, you have to submit allegiance to the New World Order. They literally tell you these things and then tell you you're crazy if you call them out on it. The theory has existed since the late 70s, but it has picked up greatly in popularity with the advent of the internet and social media platforms. FEMA is a United States government agency tasked with the effective management of major emergencies within the country, including ensuring the continuity of government during a large-scale disaster such as a nuclear war. It provides federal relief to areas affected by natural disasters. I told you guys, FEMA is in control ever since Trump declared a disaster zone in all the U.S. states. Let's see. And that was, I believe, March 12th or 15th, and it is 6 months from that date that it can't be changed or questioned. I'm trying to read. There was one thing I read earlier. Anyway, the whole point is, guys, they do want to round you into camps. And they're telling you forced isolation may be the only way to stop this virus. This virus doesn't exist. People who have it half the time don't spread it. Half the time they test you, it's inaccurate. They admit all this stuff. This is internment and resettlement operations. Find it, type in FM 3-39.40 on DuckDuckGo, Google, whatever, and you can download it yourself. But this talks about how they want to imprison you, possibly execute you if you try to escape, all sorts of stuff. This is about relocating large populations within the United States into camps and other things in case of a natural disaster. And all that stuff's in there. They declare the authority to be able to kill you if you try to escape the containment centers and things like that they set up. Pretty crazy. I mean, you can check it out if you want. Let's see. Here's an article from Haaretz. This is a Jewish paper. Donald Trump is still setting up concentration camps on American soil. It is an earlier incarnation of Auschwitz, a place of indefinite detention for a vilified minority that we saw on our border this week. The president's executive order offers no evidence this will change. So essentially what they're saying is that immigrant children are taken to a tent encampment set up by the Trump administration, that this is a concentration camp, which it is. It just isn't called that. But here's an angle that maybe you never thought of. My point is Trump is the false nationalist card. He's being used to co-opt any type of opposition that would have formed against the government by making people think Trump is for them and secretly fighting against the deep state and blah, 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 which he's doing anything but. But here's an angle you probably never thought of. What if all this stuff about immigrants and everything is just smoke and mirrors for setting up facilities for U.S. citizens under the guise of it being for immigrants? I mean, think about it. It doesn't even have to just be the pandemic quarantine centers, it could be centers set up for immigrants. I mean, they interned Japanese Americans in World War II, right? On U.S. soil. Why wouldn't they do it to you? If a war broke out or something broke out, like using a virus as a pretext, saying that forced isolation may be the only way to stop it, people in the U.S. military are going to use field manuals like this in order to figure out and organize how they're going to round you up into a concentration camp. They're not going to call it a concentration camp, but that's my point. For all you know, all this immigration stuff could just be smoke and mirrors, and it might actually be for you and not for immigrants, but they set it up with that guise and then get you to support it by thinking, yeah, them immigrants is bear. It's like, well, no, it's probably for you, and you're cheering it on, hoping that other people who you've designated as less than human will be put in them and not you. You are less than human if you think that other people are less than human just because they come from another country, you know. And I'm all for legal immigration, not illegal immigration. I'm all for legal immigration, but don't act like immigrants are the problem, because they're not, guys. And I'm not left-wing or right-wing. I'm not political. This article was first published on June 21st, 2018, and published amid an ongoing debate whether the Trump administration detention facility should be called concentration camp. So this is clearly like a left liberal-leaning paper in Israel. But, you know, the left and the right are both two sides of the same coin. So, you know, you'll have the left chastise the right for wanting to stop immigration and this and that, but that's really, like I said, probably just a smokescreen for setting up camps for us under the guise of it being to stop illegal immigrants. But, you know, they'll pretend to fight, but they'll all go in that same direction. Like, you know, the left will argue, well, we need to set up quarantine centers, and the right says, well, you can't do that. But it's like they're both arguing for the same thing, but just calling it two different names and using two different reasons to make you think that they're not working towards the same goal. Here's an article titled "The CDC is in bed with Big Pharma from Personal Liberty." This is like a mirrored article you can get in different formats on other sites. But the point that I was going to make with this is the CDC receives most of its budget from people who produce pharmaceuticals and vaccines. So it's really just a mouthpiece for people who produce that stuff. They tell you that you need to get it because of a problem that you can't verify exists, that they probably very well created, and then they try to sell you the solution to that problem. So it says, pronouncements, guidelines, and recommendations by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention set with standards for mainstream medicine in America and hold great sway with patients and around the world and with the World Health Organization because the CDC is considered independent and free of industry relationships. The organization even features the following disclaimer with its recommendations. CDC, our planners, and our content experts wish to disclose they have no financial interests or other relationships with the manufacturers of commercial products. The CDC does not accept commercial support. Let me get more coffee. Oh yeah. I drink my coffee black, by the way, if you were wondering. I've been called like a serial killer for that reason. Every time I order like a coffee, if I go through Dunkin's or something, I'm like, can I get a black? And they're like, anything else? No. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm ordering it. Of course I'm sure. But it's like they just can't believe someone just wants black coffee with none of the sugar or other crap. But anyway. But that statement is blatantly false. As recent research by the BMJ, formerly the British Medical Journal, shows, in fact, the CDC gets millions of dollars annually from Big Pharma and then turns around and recommends testing in drugs created and marketed by those same companies. And this is often done upon their contributing companies' demand. That's like in my fluoride video, that one, what was it, the Mellon Institute, I believe, was touting the safety of fluoride when it was being paid by the companies that produced the fluoride as a result of other things like aluminum and fertilizer as a byproduct. They were, instead of having to dispose of it, they convinced people it was good and used false research from this thing called the Mellon University to sell it. So they paid them to basically tell them it was good for people. Same thing with asbestos. The Mellon Institute did that. So essentially that's the same thing, right? So it says, Congress authorized the CDC to accept external gifts, in quotes, from industries and private parties in 1983. and in 1992 passed legislation for the creation of a nonprofit foundation to encourage relationships between industry and the agency. In fiscal year 2014, the CDC Foundation raised $52 million, $12 million of that from Big Pharma. Also in 2014, the CDC received $16 million in direct funding from corporations, individuals, and foundations, including the CDC Foundation, which makes the foundation nothing more than a pass-through organization. Think Clinton Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, As the BMJ reported, much of the funding from Big Pharma was conditional and earmarked for specific projects that turned out to be the promotion of the contributing company's products. One example is a $600,000 donation from Genentech to the CDC Foundation in 2012, which required the CDC to promote expanded testing and treatment of viral hepatitis. Genentech's parent corporation is Roche, which just happens to manufacture test kits and treatment drugs for hepatitis C. That same year, the CDC issued guidelines to physicians recommending that everyone born from 1945 to 1965 be screened for hepatitis C virus. What a coincidence, right? In 2010, the CDC Foundation created the Viral Hepatitis Action Coalition. The coalition purpose is to support research and promote expanded testing and treatment of hepatitis C globally. Members of the coalition, which has received $26 million in contributions from Big Pharma, include Abbott Laboratories, AbbVie, Gilead, Janssen, Merck, OraSure Technologies, Quest Diagnostics, and Siemens. All of these companies produce products and tests for the diagnosis and treatment of hepatitis C. On its website and in press releases and public pronouncements, the CDC recommends a person sick with the flu take an antiviral flu drug. It bases this recommendation on a study it claims is quote-unquote independent, but the study cited was sponsored by Roche, which manufactures the antiviral flu drug oseltamivir, known as the brand name Tamiflu. In the study's 4 authors all had ties, Roche, Genentech, or Gilead, which holds the patent on that drug. In February, the BMJ reported that the CDC was claiming antivirals quote-unquote save lives, even while the Food and Drug Administration was warning Roche that it could not make that claim in its marketing because Tamiflu, quote, had not been proven to have a positive impact on the potential consequences, such as hospitalizations, mortality, or economic impact of seasonal, avian, or pandemic influenza. In other words, there was no evidence the drug worked. The CDC Director Thomas Frieden was publicly claiming otherwise. This recommendation went to physicians who prescribed the drug to their patients, telling them that it would, quote, save their lives, or at least shorten the duration of their illness. By the way, the FDA also promotes drugs based on bogus industry studies and payments from the drug manufacturers, as I told you in my report, Email Show Pay for Play Scheme and Drug Trials. I mean, you can try to click that if you want. I'm not going to get into it, but personalliberty.com. And Big Pharma uses a similar marketing technique with physicians. It pays physicians exorbitant fees to endorse its products in industry papers and in speeches on behalf of its drugs at conventions. We've known this for a long time, right, guys? The more a doctor prescribes of a certain drug, the more kickback he gets. It's not to benefit you or to help your hypertension and diabetes or whatever it may be. It's to load his pockets and to fuel his cocaine habit and pay for his, exorbitant affairs with many mistresses. Doctors also receive kickbacks for prescribing certain drugs over others, like I just said. Lawsuits have revealed that more often than not, that industry papers are ghostwritten by the pharmaceutical company's PR hacks, and the physicians just sign their name to them without reading or understanding the research in order to receive the fee. Think Congress. The bills probably get written by, think tanks and then just signed off by them, who are paid off by the same think tanks. The legal drug business is a multi-billion-dollar scam on the people, and government has no interest in keeping people safe. I laugh when people claim government agencies are necessary to protect the people from drug makers and the other quote-unquote greedy capitalists. Many government agencies are funded by corporations and serve as revolving door programs between government and the corporations they supposedly oversee. And it's true. You'll see a bunch of front companies formed, and it might seem like a legit company or whatever, and then you click it and try to research it, and you're like, well, it's owned by this person, and it's out of this country, but it claims to be out of this country, and it's just this big incestual web of nonsense where, it all seems to connect and go back to the same people, but they use proxies to do it, to convince you that it's separate. But guys, I'm telling you, this stuff is true. Like, you need to research it. If you haven't looked into this, research internment and resettlement operations, guys. Look into FEMA and the powers that they have. Look at the executive orders that were passed that give them those powers, and which ones are actually, active right now. Listen to their words when they tell you that forced isolation may be the only way to stop the resurgence of the virus. Like I said, the world hasn't learned its lesson. To stop the spread, we must be forced to isolate from our communities and family. Remember, we haven't learned our lesson. We have to be spanked on the pee-pee. So, government's gonna spank our pee-pees, and everything's gonna be all right, guys. So, do your own research, look into things. Use their own words against them, guys. These people tell you what they're going to do and then mock you for not realizing it, and then also call you crazy for realizing it. So it's this big mental mind fuck, and you need to get over it. And remember, guys, you need to pledge allegiance to the New World Order because this ghoul wants you to. Listen to her in her own words.
Those agencies and you pick the people to run those agencies and the deputies that are pledging allegiance to the New World Order and good governance.